Mistress thinks she won until Millionaire, pregnant wife, unleashes her ultimate revenge. Power, love, and betrayal entangle in a web of secrets when a ruthless mistress believes she's conquered it all. Everyone thinks they know the real story, a self-made millionaire, his glamorous life, and the woman who lures him away. But beneath the glittering surface, a pregnant wife quietly plans the ultimate payback, one that will unravel hidden motives and shatter every last illusion. As the mistress flaunts her supposed victory, she has no inkling that the scorned wife has a master plan. Brace yourself for the shocking twists in this tale of loyalty, vengeance, and an empire built on lies, until one woman's revenge lights the final spark. Maribel Astor prided herself on perfection. 26 years old, with a mane of golden brown hair that cascaded down her back and a magnetic smile that masked her cunning ambition, she had navigated New York's elite social scene with razor-sharp instincts. A child of modest upbringing in rural Pennsylvania, she'd arrived in Manhattan with barely $200 and a dream. Over the span of 7 years, she'd clawed her way into the corridors of power, starting as a hostess in a 5-star restaurant and eventually charming her way onto the arm of wealthy businessmen, each stepping stone leading her closer to affluence. Now, she believed her greatest conquest yet was at hand. Miles Beaumont was the embodiment of the American dream. The tabloids gushed about his status as a self-made millionaire who was worth over $80 million by the age of 38. He was the son of a Bronx firefighter and a part-time secretary. Through relentless work and strategic brilliance, Miles founded Beacon Heights, a real estate investment firm that soared to unprecedented success. His professional aura radiated confidence. People often joked that Miles could speak to you for 2 minutes and walk away with your life savings if he wanted to. Maribel had met him at a fundraising gala held at the iconic Plaza Hotel. Her meticulous research led her there. She knew he was on the guest list, and she made sure her seat was only a table away. Wearing a floor-length crimson gown with a plunging neckline, she'd spent the evening laughing at jokes from aging philanthropists and batting her eyelashes at the wealthy hedge fund managers. But her real target was Miles. When their eyes finally locked across the ballroom, Maribel felt the same adrenaline rush she used to feel as a small-town track star sprinting for the finish line. She sauntered over to him, feigning interest in a conversation about city ordinances. They exchanged polite smiles, a handshake, and that was it. Maribel knew he was hooked. Behind the scenes, though, the world saw the real power in the Beaumont household as belonging to Alexis Beaumont, Miles's pregnant wife. Alexis was an Ivy League graduate who had inherited part of her father's shipping empire. She'd seamlessly blended her generational wealth with Miles's real estate investments, creating a powerhouse couple revered throughout Manhattan. Some whispered that Alexis was the key to Miles's success, with her family connections opening doors for his fledgling firm. Others argued that Miles was the visionary, steering their combined fortunes into bigger, more lucrative territories. Either way, from the outside, the union appeared unbreakable until Maribel slithered in. A few chance encounters at business luncheons turned into discreet coffee dates, which evolved into late-night rendezvous at a penthouse suite in the Mandarin Oriental. By the time Alexis announced she was expecting their first child, Maribel was already celebrating 6 months of a clandestine affair. Now, as Alexis entered her second trimester, Maribel believed it was time to strike. After all, she thought, the timing was perfect. Pregnant women lose their appeal, become consumed with maternal responsibilities, or so Maribel's outdated stereotypes told her. She imagined Miles growing bored or restless. She could practically taste victory whenever she recalled how he once whispered in her ear, "I can't wait for a new life. You're my future, Maribel." She'd replayed that moment so many times, it had become the lullaby that soothed her each night. But beneath Miles's polished charm, tension crackled. He was a man torn between the stability of an empire he'd built with his wife and the intoxicating allure of a younger, more audacious lover. As Maribel glowed with confidence, Alexis quietly sensed something amiss. The subtle changes in Miles's behavior, his sudden propensity for working late nights, carefully angled phone screens, and his guilt-ridden avoidance of eye contact were like sirens blaring in her head. She felt the tightening knot in her chest, yet she said nothing. She only smiled sweetly and continued to rest her hand on her growing belly. Maribel observed Alexis from a distance, convinced of the pregnant wife's weakness. She told herself that once the baby was born, Alexis would have neither the time nor the energy to keep her marriage afloat. "Everything is lining up perfectly," Maribel confided in her best friend, Elisha Chen, who was far from comfortable with Maribel's manipulations. But Maribel wouldn't be swayed. She had her eyes set on the ultimate prize, the title of Mrs. Miles Beaumont, with all the wealth and status that came along. As Maribel perfected her strategy, quietly planting doubts in Miles's mind, showing up unexpectedly in public spaces to wave at him from across the room, she overlooked a critical detail. She had never truly measured Alexis's strength, never considered the possibility that behind Alexis's gentle demeanor lay a fiercely protective spirit, forged in the pressure cooker of high society expectations and unwavering ambition. While Maribel believed she'd already won, Alexis was observing, gathering her allies, and plotting her own ruthless plan for revenge. Weeks passed, and the hush of secrecy surrounding Miles and Maribel's affair grew louder in Alexis's mind. She found herself drained by morning sickness and migraines, but rather than let her discomfort overshadow the looming suspicion, she channeled her energies into quiet investigation. If Miles was cheating on her, she needed incontrovertible proof. Instinct alone wasn't enough in the cutthroat environment of Manhattan elites, especially when the scandal would rock not just her personal life, but also her family's shipping empire and Miles's real estate empire. She started with small steps. Alexis rummaged through Miles's suits when he was in the shower. She checked for mysterious lipstick stains, love notes, or suspicious receipts from high-end boutiques or discreet hotels. Nothing. She pored over credit card statements late at night when she couldn't sleep, searching for anomalies in the dining or travel expenses. Most looked legitimate: business lunches at Cipriani's, client dinners at The Modern, and even the odd coffee purchase that was under $10, which seemed almost too normal. Miles covered his tracks well. Her next step was more decisive. She hired a private investigator. Discreet and professional, Tony Delgado came recommended by an old family friend, the well-known attorney Linda Moore, who had previously represented Alexis's father in a high-profile shipping lawsuit. Tony specialized in infidelity cases among high-profile clientele, sworn to secrecy by the steep fees he charged. Meeting Tony in a dimly lit corner of the Peninsula Hotel bar, Alexis revealed her suspicions in hushed tones. His eyes hardened with empathy. He'd seen this scenario 1,000 times. He agreed to tail Miles, track his phone signals, and record any questionable activities. While Alexis pursued truth through Tony, Maribel continued her seduction. She texted Miles playful emojis and provocative photos late into the night, capturing his attention just as Alexis dozed off under the weight of her pregnancy. She accompanied him on business trips to Boston, staying in separate rooms at the Liberty Hotel, but slipping into his suite each evening. In public, they maintained a strictly professional demeanor. But once behind closed doors, the boundaries vanished in a blur of lust and whispered promises about a future they imagined was imminent. For Miles, the affair was a guilty thrill. Every time he caressed Maribel's skin, a sliver of shame needled him. Alexis was at home, pregnant with his child, trusting in the life they built together. But he told himself he deserved this excitement, that life was short, that maybe he had lost some spark. The rationalizations came easily when Maribel's arms were around him. Then came Tony's first report. Alexis read it in her private study one afternoon, her tea turning cold on the mahogany desk. Tony's words were clinical and thorough. Photos of Miles entering the Mandarin Oriental with Maribel, timestamps of them leaving the building at suspiciously overlapping intervals, audio snippets from a phone call referencing our next weekend getaway. The evidence was damning. Alexis felt her throat constrict, tears threatening, but she refused to break down. Instead, she calmly filed the report into a locked drawer and dialed Tony's number. "This is enough," she said, voice steady. "We don't need more details. I have to plan what comes next." Tony hesitated. "Are you sure, Mrs. Beaumont? Usually I advise." She cut him off. "I'm not looking for a typical divorce. There's a bigger picture here." Alexis had grown up immersed in the intricacies of power struggles, from boardroom betrayals to behind closed doors family rivalries. She knew that rash decisions led to compromised positions. What she needed was a carefully orchestrated strategy, one that would not just punish Miles and Maribel, but ensure her own dominance remained intact. She didn't want half of the empire. She wanted control, and if Miles's poor judgment risked toppling everything they had built, she would remove him as easily as a queen captures a rook on a chessboard. That evening, Alexis confronted Miles subtly. She didn't accuse him outright. Instead, she expressed concerns about his long working hours and the toll it was taking on her pregnancy. He responded with guilt-laden tenderness, holding her hand and promising he'd cut back after the Boston conference. Alexis merely smiled, as though oblivious, then rested her head on his shoulder. Miles felt relieved. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "It's all for us and the baby, you know that." But as Alexis breathed in his familiar cologne, she secretly imagined a different scenario, a board meeting, the reveal of his betrayal, and her father, Henry Fitzgerald, firing off a string of legal maneuvers that would leave Miles humiliated. The thought calmed her nerves, oddly. She was preparing for war, and she had every intention of winning. Meanwhile, Maribel reveled in the illusion that she was on the cusp of becoming queen. In her modest West Village apartment, she and her friend Alicia toasted to her inevitable victory. Though Alicia tried to play devil's advocate, suggesting there might be more to Alexis than meets the eye, Maribel waved off the warnings with a flick of her perfectly manicured hand. "She's just a pregnant wife," Maribel cooed. "She can't hold on to him forever." But Maribel was mistaken. Alexis was no hapless victim. And the more Maribel gloated, the closer she came to triggering the avalanche that Alexis was meticulously preparing behind her serene facade. At the exclusive Norwood Club on 14th Street, Alexis hosted a charity luncheon for women's health initiatives, a cause dear to her heart, and a convenient front for privately gathering information. Clad in a flowing emerald gown that complemented her growing baby bump, she glided among high society guests, greeting everyone with her trademark poise. Photography interns snapped pictures for social media. Among them was Gina Carlson from Vogue, who recognized Alexis's philanthropic work as the perfect headline, "Pregnant Socialite Champions Maternal Health." In one corner, the CFO of Beaumont's real estate firm, Charles Wheeler, confided in Alexis about a mysterious discrepancy in the company's finances. Several accounts linked to a consultant named M. Astor were accruing suspiciously high payments. Initially believed to be a marketing contractor, the name had few references. Wheeler, known for his meticulous nature, found it odd. Alexis smiled, noting the cunning behind the alias. In her mind, Monsieur Castor could only be Maribel. Miles was funneling money to her under the guise of professional consulting. It was a breadcrumb leading to the heart of his deceit. Across the room, Alexis spotted an unexpected but familiar face. Maribel herself, dressed in a striking cobalt-sheath dress, faux humility plastered across her features. She'd managed to gain entry by tagging along with a minor socialite, no doubt a strategic move to place herself in Alexis's orbit. As Alexis locked eyes with her rival, she remained outwardly composed. Internally, her pulse quickened. This was the first time they were in the same room without the buffer of Miles. Maribel approached with a confident smile, hand outstretched. "Miss Essa." "Beaumont," she said warmly, "what a wonderful event you've organized. I'm so glad to support such a noble cause." The hypocrisy of her words almost drew a laugh from Alexis, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you, Miss Astor," Alexis replied, noting the quick flicker of surprise on Maribel's face at being recognized. "I appreciate your attendance. Every donation counts." She let her gaze linger just long enough to communicate, "I know exactly who you are." An icy tension crackled between them, visible only to those who cared to observe closely. Maribel retreated, unnerved by the subtle threat. She had expected Alexis to be aloof or even clueless. Instead, she found a woman who radiated quiet confidence, carrying herself like a queen among courtiers. Despite this, Maribel reassured herself that Alexis was simply preoccupied with pregnancy. She refused to see the storm gathering in her path. By evening, word of the charity event had circulated among New York's elite. Social media buzzed with praise for Alexis's philanthropic efforts, while gossip pages salivated over rumored tension between her and a mysterious guest. Miles, upon hearing that Maribel had shown up at Alexis's event, felt a twinge of panic. He texted Maribel, "Why did you go there? Are you trying to get caught?" Maribel responded with a sly grin on her face, "Just networking." "Relax." Miles didn't reply. Instead, he stared at his phone, beads of sweat forming on his temples. That was the first time he fully grasped the precariousness of juggling two worlds. He had tried so hard to keep them separate, but Maribel's ambition was now forcing them to converge. For the first time, Miles doubted his ability to control the narrative. He could sense Alexis's growing suspicion, though he refused to admit that she might already be several moves ahead. That night, in their penthouse overlooking Central Park, Alexis held a stack of documents, payment records for Mem. Astor, Tony Delgado's private investigation notes, and a drafted set of legal strategies from Linda Moore. She had everything she needed to devastate Miles financially, socially, and personally. But she needed to time it perfectly. Like a patient chess master, she would wait for the moment that served her best interest and most viciously dismantled her opponent. In a gesture of calculated intimacy, Alexis slid into bed beside Miles, pressing her body against his. She needed him calm, unsuspecting. If he thought she was drifting into contentment, he might let his guard down further. He wrapped his arms around her, whispering, "I'm sorry, I haven't been around much. Work's been insane." She feigned a tired smile. "I know, love, but I trust you'll do what's best for our family." His guilt momentarily washed away at her understanding tone. He thought he'd evaded disaster yet again. Little did he know the next wave of betrayal would come not from him, but from Alexis, his wife, the mother of his unborn child, who was assembling a revenge plan that would shake his entire world to its core. 2 weeks later, Alexis attended an exclusive Women in Business conference at the Harvard Club. Among the keynote speakers was none other than Linda Moore, the formidable attorney who had represented the Fitzgerald shipping dynasty in several controversies. Linda was also an old family friend. Alexis took a seat in the front row, her pregnancy conspicuous under a tailored black dress. As Linda addressed the audience on the theme of strategic influence, winning without fighting, Alexis felt every word resonate. During the break, Alexis cornered Linda in a private lounge area, away from the prying ears of reporters and social media influencers. Over a cup of chamomile tea, Alexis revealed the full scope of her plan. She wanted out of the marriage, but not in the typical sense. She wanted to seize control of Miles's real estate empire, ensuring not only her financial stability, but also a public narrative that painted her as the resilient, triumphant spouse who overcame betrayal. Linda listened intently, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "You know the reputational risks," Linda said, crossing her legs. "Divorce among the wealthy is a high-stakes game. Public sympathy might be on your side, but that only lasts until your next board meeting. If we play our cards right, though, we can do more than just expose him. We can ensure you emerge unscathed and possibly wealthier." Alexis nodded. "I want to protect my child's future. But I also want him and her to understand the consequences of crossing me." Her voice was steady, her heart beating with grim determination. "Her?" Linda raised an eyebrow. "The mistress, Maribel Astor," Alexis clarified. "She's the type who believes she's unstoppable. If we don't teach her a lesson, she'll resurface again, going after another family." Linda sighed. "From a legal standpoint, I can't represent you in personal retribution. But if you want to orchestrate a public fiasco that leaves her humiliated, I can ensure we do it within the confines of the law, or at least in ways that are difficult to litigate." A small smile tugged at Alexis's lips. "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear." Days later, Alexis set phase 1 of her plan into motion: sabotage the financial pipeline Miles had created for Maribel. In hush-hush meetings with Charles Wheeler, they arranged for an internal audit of all consultancy fees within Beacon Heights. She used her father's influence. Henry Fitzgerald still held significant sway in global commerce, and Miles relied heavily on those connections. When Wheeler announced an official inquiry, Miles was cornered. He had to comply or risk losing bigger investors. Under the guise of routine company scrutiny, the name M. Astor was flagged, its suspiciously large payouts put on indefinite hold. Maribel, suddenly cut off from her steady stream of consulting income, confronted Miles. They met at a hidden booth in an upscale sushi bar near Madison Avenue. Maribel's eyes were ablaze with frustration. "Why isn't the money coming in? I have bills." "I can't just live off scraps while you figure out your corporate drama." Miles rubbed his temples. "It's just a temporary audit. No one suspects anything yet, but we need to be more careful." Anxiety gnawed at him if Maribel kept pressing, and this turned into a scandal. He'd lose Alexis's father's backing. That alone could cripple Beacon Heights. "Can't you just tighten the budget for a little while?" "Tighten the budget?" Maribel scoffed, her voice rising. "I left my job, my apartment is not cheap, and you promised to take care of me. Now you're telling me to wait." She almost hurled her glass of sake across the table, but managed to hold back. Public scenes weren't her style, but she was reaching a breaking point. "We'll figure it out," Miles said, his voice laced with desperation. "I'm juggling a lot." Alexis is, he cut himself off, not wanting to delve into the complexities of dealing with his pregnant wife. But Maribel sensed the tension. She grabbed his hand, her voice softening. "I know it's complicated," she purred, "but maybe it's time. Time for us to make our move. We could run away to the Bahamas, or even London. Start fresh, just you and me." In her mind, this was the end game: Miles divorcing Alexis, humiliating her in public, and walking away with Maribel to a new life of unbridled wealth. She had no clue Alexis was already spinning a web to catch them both. Miles forced a half-smile. "Let's not rush. Let me handle the financial situation first. After that, we'll see about the rest." But as he walked out of the sushi bar, Maribel following close behind, each felt the fraying strands of control. Maribel had glimpsed a potential downfall in the abrupt freeze of her funds. Miles felt the suffocating pressure of Alexis's silent watchfulness and his company's precarious position. Neither realized that their illusions of control were about to be shattered. For Alexis was not merely reacting, she was orchestrating a symphony of destruction, and the crescendo was drawing ever closer. A few nights later, Alexis hosted an intimate dinner at her penthouse. The guest list was small but influential, including her closest confidant, Avery Russell, an art curator at the Guggenheim, and Linda Moore, who arrived fashionably late in a sleek navy suit. Over candlelight and a three-course meal catered by chef Jean-Georges, they discussed fine art, philanthropic endeavors, and the upcoming real estate expo in Miami. However, the true purpose of the gathering lay in the subtext of every polite smile and every discreetly exchanged glance, the finalization of Alexis's revenge plan. Alexis guided them to a private den after dessert. The room was minimalist yet luxurious, its walls adorned with original works by contemporary artists. There, she locked the door behind them. She set a thick folder on the coffee table and laid out her strategy. Linda flipped through the legal documents, nodding at intervals. Avery, more of an aesthetic mind than a legal one, asked, "Are you sure you're not going too far? Exposing him publicly could get messy. The media will feast on it." "That's exactly the point," Alexis replied. "Miles built his brand on loyalty, family values, and moral high ground. If the scandal breaks publicly, he'll lose credibility, at least for a while, and I can then position myself as the scorned but strong wife who overcame adversity. Investors, ironically, might rally around me." Linda added, "We'll have to be cautious. If we orchestrate this badly, it could rebound on Alexis, painting her as vindictive. But if we strike the right note, especially playing up the pregnant wife angle, sympathy will naturally flow her way." Avery pressed her fingertips against her temples. "This is so strategic. I never realized just how cold you can be." Alexis's gaze flickered with a steely glint. "I'm protecting my child's future and teaching them both a lesson they won't forget." Meanwhile, Maribel, feeling increasingly cornered, decided to turn to a surprising ally of her own, an ex-boyfriend named Justin Ford, a tech entrepreneur she'd dated briefly before Miles. Justin had fallen on hard times after a failed startup, but he still possessed a certain cunning. Maribel believed he might help her gather damaging intel on Alexis, anything that could tip the scales in her favor. The pair met in a nondescript co-working space near Chelsea. Justin, with his sandy hair and nervous energy, listened as Maribel spun her tale of imminent betrayal by the almighty Alexis Beaumont. "She's definitely onto us," Maribel insisted, "and I need leverage. A skeleton in her closet. Maybe something about her shipping empire ties, her father's lawsuits, anything I can use to keep her from destroying me." Justin tapped his fingers on the desk, eyes gleaming with interest. "Information is power, especially in high society. Let me see what I can dig up." Maribel left the meeting feeling a flicker of hope. She imagined unearthing a scandal so big Alexis would be forced to back down. Little did she know, Alexis's entire life had been meticulously vetted and guarded by top-tier legal teams and PR experts. Maribel was likely embarking on a fool's errand. Days merged into nights, each side chasing illusions of dominance. Miles found himself under escalating pressure at Beacon Heights. Investors were asking pointed questions. Wheeler was breathing down his neck about the consultancy fiasco, and Alexis remained the picture of supportive tranquility, never once hinting that she suspected. In quiet moments, Miles felt an odd sense of dread. The silence was too perfect. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Miles approached Alexis's father, Henry Fitzgerald, to request a private meeting about potential business restructuring. They convened at the Ritz-Carlton's private lounge. Henry, a tall man in his 60s with a distinguished bearing, listened politely as Miles danced around the idea of needing extra liquidity and new foreign partnerships. He avoided mentioning the questionable payments to Maribel, but hinted that the company needed additional capital to weather a short-term storm. Henry sipped his bourbon with measured calm. "Let me get this straight. You want me to allocate more resources to Beacon Heights while you're under an internal audit? Is that correct?" His tone carried the faintest edge of disapproval. "It's a standard procedure." "Truly," Miles lied, "Wheeler is just being overly cautious." Henry studied him for a long moment. "Beacon Heights has done well, but your personal life, does it remain stable?" Miles's heart pounded. "Of course," he answered too quickly. "Alexis is fine, the baby is healthy. We're just preparing for expansions that coincide with the child's birth." Henry said nothing, letting the silence speak volumes. Finally, he rose from his seat. "I'll have my team review your proposal. In the meantime, I suggest you keep your house in order. My daughter's happiness is paramount to me. If anything is amiss, trust that I'll do whatever is necessary to protect her." The threat lay heavy in the air. Miles forced a smile, but as Henry departed, he felt a chill. It was another reminder that Alexis was far from powerless. His father-in-law had built an empire that spanned continents. A minor real estate firm like Beacon Heights could be crushed with a single phone call. Unbeknownst to Miles, that was precisely the phone call Alexis and Henry planned to make when the time was right. The war continued in hushed negotiations, stolen texts, and silent maneuvers. But the day of reckoning was inching closer, each participant tightening their grasp on the illusions of control that would soon collapse. An overcast Wednesday morning found Miles waking up to the sound of Alexis moving around the penthouse. He glanced at his phone, 5 missed calls from Maribel. Suddenly, his chest felt tight. It had been 3 days since he'd last seen her, and he knew she'd be losing her temper about the stalled consultancy payments. Before he could slip away to return the calls, Alexis stepped into the bedroom. She was dressed in a simple but elegant blouse and maternity slacks. "Morning," she greeted softly, resting a hand on her growing belly. "I thought we could have breakfast together." Miles nodded, forcing a smile. "Sure, that'd be nice." Over omelettes and fresh squeezed orange juice, Alexis began gently prodding. "You seem stressed lately. Is there anything on your mind?" He glanced at her, searching for any hint of accusation in her expression. Finding none, he responded, "Just the usual pressure with investors." A half-truth at best. She tilted her head sympathetically. "I understand. My father mentioned you two spoke. He said you seemed concerned about business growth." Miles felt a jolt. "He's just cautious," he stammered. "You know how it is. Everyone wants to make sure the company stays profitable, especially with the baby coming." Alexis nodded, a kind smile on her lips. "I'm sure you'll handle it. You always do." She reached out and gently squeezed his hand. The gesture almost brought Miles to tears. He couldn't believe the depth of her kindness he didn't deserve. The sting of guilt left him silent, even as the phone in his pocket buzzed incessantly with Maribel's calls. Later that day, Alexis had a scheduled check-up at Mount Sinai Hospital. Miles insisted on accompanying her, eager to distract himself from the chaos swirling around him. They listened to their baby's heartbeat, watched the ultrasound images flicker on a screen. Alexis found herself overcome by emotion despite her calculated plan. She truly did love this unborn child. She wondered if Miles felt the same sincerity, or if his mind was elsewhere. In truth, Miles was awash in conflicting emotions. The ultrasound humanized the impending fatherhood that he'd partly tried to ignore. He felt awe, excitement, and a crushing sense of shame. He was betraying Alexis at a time when she was most vulnerable, an action that now felt increasingly unjustifiable. And yet, each time he tried to break things off with Maribel, the tension built inside him, her fury, her pleas, her manipulative charm. That evening, as Alexis dozed off under medication for her prenatal fatigue, Miles sneaked into the study to call Maribel back. The moment she picked up, her tirade erupted. "I've been trying to reach you all day, Miles. This is ridiculous. I can't live like this." He lowered his voice, afraid of waking Alexis. "You need to calm down. The audit is out of my control." "Give me time." "How much time?" she demanded. "I'm running on fumes here. I need money. My landlord is threatening eviction." Her voice cracked. "You promised me a better life, not constant anxiety." Miles felt torn between pity and exasperation. "I'll figure something out, but you have to back off. Don't attend any more of Alexis's events. Don't try to corner me in public." Maribel let out a bitter laugh. "Or what? You'll cut me off entirely? Don't think I won't go to the tabloids. I can blow your entire life apart with a single interview." The threat hung in the air. Miles's temper flared. "Don't even think about it, Maribel. If you do, you'll ruin us both. You won't get a dime. Then find a way to pay me," she hissed, ending the call. Miles sank into the leather armchair, head in his hands. For the first time, he regretted every step that led him here. But regret wouldn't save him now. The next phase of Alexis's plan was already in motion, a plan he remained willfully blind to, even as his entire foundation cracked beneath him. It was on that same night that Alexis quietly slipped out of bed and made her own phone call. Not to her father or Linda, but to Tony Delgado, the private investigator. With careful instructions, she updated him on the timeline. Within the next 2 weeks, she said, "It's time. Gather every piece of evidence you have: pictures, recordings, financial documents, text messages. I want it all. We're going public." Tony's professional detachment wavered for a moment. "You're sure you want to do this now, Mrs. Beaumont? We could wait until after the baby's born." Alexis placed a hand on her belly, feeling a gentle kick. "The baby will be born into a better world if I settle this now." She ended the call, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The storm was almost here, and no one could prevent it from making landfall. Not Miles, not Maribel, no one. And when it did, Alexis intended to stand at the center with her head held high, watching the chaos she had orchestrated sweep them all into a new reality she alone would control. Maribel felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She was no longer certain Miles would come through with the money, and her ex-boyfriend Justin Ford's search for dirt on Alexis was producing scant results. Aside from a few business dealings that were already public knowledge, Alexis's record was squeaky clean. Maribel's frustration boiled over. She needed a new tactic. Desperation led her to schedule a clandestine meeting with a junior gossip columnist from the New York Post, Sarah Quintero, who specialized in celebrity exposes. They met in a secluded corner of a midtown cafe, wearing oversized sunglasses and hats to avoid recognition. Maribel knew she was taking a risk, but felt she had no choice. "I have a story that will sell papers," Maribel said in hushed tones, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside were grainy photographs of her entering and leaving hotels with Miles, and a few text message screenshots. "That's Miles Beaumont, real estate mogul, and I'm his mistress. His wife is pregnant." Sarah raised an eyebrow, flipping through the photos. "This is tabloid gold," she said. "But do you have anything more conclusive? These are suspicious, sure, but it could be explained away." Maribel leaned forward. "I can give you explicit details: dates, times, credit card receipts. Enough to make your readers salivate." She paused, trying to gauge Sarah's interest. But I'm not giving it all away for free. I want a written agreement that I'll receive a portion of the story's syndication revenue. I want to feature front page if possible. Sarah hesitated. We have a procedure. I'll need to run this up the chain. The Post doesn't typically offer profit sharing, but a large sum for an exclusive? That might be doable. Maribel glanced around nervously. Make it happen. And keep me anonymous initially. I'll come forward when it's the right moment. Leaving the cafe, she felt both exhilarated and terrified. If Sarah ran with the story, it would blow the lid off everything. Miles's carefully curated public image would crumble, Alexis would find out, and the scandal would rock New York high society. But maybe that was the leverage Maribel needed. With everything out in the open, Miles would have to leave Alexis for her, or lose everything. Either way, Maribel assumed she could seize control of the narrative and, by extension, seize control of Miles's future. What she failed to consider was that Alexis had already prepared a narrative of her own, one backed by legal muscle and carefully curated sympathy. If Maribel hoped to thrive in the glare of tabloid headlines, she was about to collide with a woman who had spent her life learning to wield the media as a weapon. Meanwhile, back at Beacon Heights, tensions soared. Charles Wheeler discovered a second consultancy account under a slightly different name, MAASTOR Holdings. The amounts funneled there were even larger. When he tried to approach Miles, Miles brushed him off, claiming it was a private arrangement for a foreign marketing initiative. But Wheeler was no fool. He looped in the compliance team, sealing the final cracks in Miles's shaky defense. Miles, cornered, took drastic measures. He liquidated a portion of his personal stock holdings at a loss, funneling the cash to Maribel to keep her quiet. But to his horror, his father-in-law, Henry Fitzgerald, caught wind of the stock sale. Alarmed, Henry confronted Miles in a late-night phone call. "Are you out of your mind? Dumping that many shares so abruptly? You're going to trigger speculation that the company's in trouble. Our partners in Singapore are already asking questions." Miles stammered. It was personal. I had an urgent expense." "You can't keep making these mistakes, son," Henry said, voice dripping with barely contained anger. "It reflects poorly on you, and by extension, on my daughter and this family. Get your house in order." Click. The line went dead. Miles stared at the phone, a cold sweat trickling down his neck. He felt trapped between three forces: Maribel's relentless demands, Alexis's unknowable suspicions, and Henry's merciless scrutiny. The world he had built with such care was teetering on the brink of collapse. Unbeknownst to him, Maribel's meeting with the gossip columnist was the final spark. By the weekend, rumors had begun circulating among New York's lesser-known tabloids. The story wasn't front-page news yet, but the fuse was lit. And while Maribel imagined she could control the explosion, Alexis was quietly preparing the final strike, a devastating, elegantly executed maneuver that would leave Maribel stunned, Miles ruined, and Alexis triumphant in the public eye. The day of the real estate expo in Miami arrived, and with it, the perfect stage for Alexis to unveil her master stroke. Miles had flown down early, hoping to close a few deals and smooth talk potential investors. Alexis, citing her pregnancy, planned to arrive a day later with Henry Fitzgerald and Linda Moore in tow, an entourage that signaled both status and caution. Back in New York, Maribel caught wind of the expo. She saw it as an opportunity to forcibly insert herself into Miles's professional sphere. If she could appear by his side at an after-party or private dinner, the press might latch onto the scandal before Alexis could control the narrative. She promptly booked a flight to Miami, ignoring Elisha's repeated warnings that she was treading on dangerous ground. Upon arrival, Maribel checked into a smaller boutique hotel, a short Uber ride from where Miles and other real estate moguls were staying at the Four Seasons. She called him incessantly, leaving voicemails when he didn't pick up. "I'm in Miami," she said. In one of them, her tone a mix of threat and invitation. "We need to talk. Either you see me, or I'll find another way to get your attention." Miles, frazzled, didn't respond. Instead, he spent the day rushing from one booth to another on the expo floor, signing autographs on his book, Reinventing Urban Space, and shaking hands with bigwig investors. Despite the whirlwind of activity, a sense of looming disaster gnawed at him. He kept glancing around, half expecting Maribel to appear out of nowhere or a swarm of reporters to descend on him with incriminating evidence. That night, Alexis arrived. Dressed in a flowing navy blue gown that elegantly concealed her growing belly, she glided into the Expo's gala dinner like a queen returning to her court. Henry, stoic and imposing at her side, made it clear that their presence was not to be trivialized. Linda hovered near them, her eyes ever watchful for any sign of scandal or confrontation. As the guests mingled over champagne, Alexis spotted Maribel skulking in the periphery, wearing a too-short, sequined dress that clashed with the event's refined elegance. Their eyes met briefly. A jolt of recognition passed between them. Maribel scowled, while Alexis merely offered a placid, knowing smile. Neither woman spoke. Near midnight, as the gala wound down, Alexis cornered Miles in a secluded hallway. She linked her arm through his and whispered, "Let's go back to our suite. I want to talk to you about something important." His heart hammered in his chest. "Of course," he managed, attempting to match her cool demeanor. In the elevator, he noticed the hardened set of her jaw. Something was coming, he could feel it. Inside the suite, Alexis closed the door, then calmly removed her earrings. She turned to face him. "I know about the affair," she said quietly. Her voice was cold, yet steady. "I know about Maribel." Miles's face went white. "Alexis, she held up a hand. "You lied to me. You betrayed our marriage while I'm carrying your child. And I've known for some time." He started to deny it, but the futility was obvious. Instead, he stammered, "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Her eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. "But you did, and now we have to deal with it." He braced himself for a torrent of accusations or tears. But instead, Alexis's expression changed to something almost regal. "Tomorrow morning, we will have a press conference here at the hotel. You will stand by my side, and we will announce that I'm stepping in as interim CFO of Beacon Heights, because Wheeler is resigning, effective immediately." That story is going to overshadow every other rumor out there. Miles was too stunned to speak. Wheeler resigning, interim CFO, Alexis stepping in? This was orchestrated. He realized she had planned this for weeks. She added, her voice icy, "If you fight me, I will leak every piece of evidence of your affair to the press myself. Photos, audio recordings, financial documents. It won't just be a personal scandal, it will be a corporate meltdown. Your investors will flee. My father will see to that." Miles felt the world tilt under his feet. "You can't. Are you serious?" She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "Try me. I've already got Linda Moore drafting statements. If you cooperate, we'll spin this as a strategic leadership shift. You'll remain the face of Beacon Heights, but I'll be the brains. And when the baby's born, we'll present a united front." He swallowed hard. "And Maribel is irrelevant," Alexis said, her lip curling. "She'll find that every door is closed to her. No press outlet will run her story. And if she tries to go rogue, our legal team will bury her in defamation lawsuits. She will disappear into obscurity, broke and humiliated." At that moment, the scale of her plan became clear. This wasn't just revenge, it was a hostile takeover. She was leaving Miles with no choice but to comply or face total ruin. Unable to process, he sank onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. He had to save what he could, the future of his company, his child's future, and maybe a sliver of dignity. Alexis watched him, her heart pounding. She had fantasized about this confrontation for months, but the reality felt strangely hollow. Love was tangled with fury, heartbreak with satisfaction. Still, she steeled herself. She was determined that this child would be born into power and security, not the chaos. Miles had unleashed. Without another word, she turned and left the suite, leaving Miles alone in the suffocating darkness. Tomorrow would bring the final act, a public display of unity, overshadowing a scandal that might have destroyed lesser women. But Alexis was not a lesser woman. She was a Fitzgerald by birth, a Beaumont by marriage, and she was about to prove that no mistress could unseat a reigning queen. Morning arrived with a sticky Miami heat. Anxiety churned in Miles's stomach as he and Alexis made their way to the hotel's conference room. Staff bustled about, adjusting microphones and arranging chairs. A small cluster of reporters awaited, invited under the premise of a significant corporate announcement from Beacon Heights. Henry Fitzgerald was absent, choosing to remain behind the scenes for now. Linda Moore stood off to one side, her arms folded, face composed in an unreadable mask. Nearby, Tony Delgado lingered, disguised as hotel security, a last-minute arrangement by Alexis to ensure that Maribel couldn't storm the press conference or ambush Miles in front of the cameras. Maribel, however, had other plans. Furious at being cut off financially and suspecting that a major announcement would overshadow her own attempts to expose the affair, she decided to confront Miles in public. She bypassed the normal security by flashing a forged press badge, courtesy of her brief association with Sarah Quintero. As the cameras started rolling, Maribel slid into a seat in the back row, eyes laser-focused on the stage. Miles and Alexis appeared before the podium. Miles, pale and visibly sweating, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, voice faltering. "I'd like to announce some important changes at Beacon Heights." Before he could continue, Alexis stepped gracefully forward. "As of today, our CFO, Charles Wheeler, has tendered his resignation for personal reasons. We appreciate his years of service." She paused, letting the cameras flash. "In the interim, I will be assuming the role of CFO. We believe this leadership transitions a sustained growth and innovation." A flurry of questions erupted from the press. One reporter asked, "Does this indicate any internal issues at Beacon Heights?" Alexis smiled serenely. "Not at all. It's a proactive measure to ensure stability as our company continues to expand." The next question from a local business journal was about the timeline for Wheeler's departure. Alexis fielded it effortlessly. Miles, meanwhile, stood stiffly, nodding in agreement when prompted. Every moment felt like walking a razor's edge. Suddenly, Maribel rose from her seat, her voice slicing through the polite chatter. "What about the rumors of infidelity? Is this leadership change a cover-up for Mr. Beaumont's affair with a Beacon Heights consultant?" She held up her phone, snapping pictures in rapid succession. Gasps rippled through the room. The cameras swiveled to capture the altercation. Alexis, feigning surprise, looked at Maribel with a chilling calm. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" "I'm Maribel Astor," she declared, stepping forward. "The so-called consultant your company has been paying off." Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and desperation. "Miles Beaumont has been having an affair with me for nearly a year. Why don't you tell the world about that?" Reporters erupted in chaos, some pivoting cameras toward Maribel, others shouting questions at Miles and Alexis. Miles's face drained of color, and for a moment he appeared frozen. Alexis, however, maintained her composure. She raised a hand, demanding silence. "I see," she said, glancing at the security detail. Would you please escort Miss Astor out? We have no record of her being on the press list. Maribel tried to shake off the security guard, who took hold of her arm. "Don't you dare ignore me," she yelled, voice nearing hysteria. "I have proof, photos, text, everything." A hush fell as Alexis stepped away from the podium and approached Maribel. The cameras caught every second. In a tone laced with both pity and scorn, Alexis spoke just loudly enough for the closest microphones to pick up. "Miss Astor, I'm aware of your delusions. My husband and I have endured your attempts to extort us for quite some time. It's unfortunate." She nodded at the security guard. "Please remove her." Maribel's eyes widened in disbelief, her voice cracking. "You're lying! Miles, tell them!" Miles opened his mouth, but no words came. Panicking, he recalled Alexis's threat: comply or face utter ruin. He couldn't bring himself to speak. At that moment, Maribel realized she'd lost any semblance of control. The humiliation seared her pride. As the guards dragged her away, her screams echoed in the conference room. "I'm telling the truth. You can't silence me forever." The press clamored for answers, but Alexis, wearing the mask of a composed socialite, gestured for them to settle. "We will not dignify these accusations further," she announced, voice trembling just enough to evoke sympathy. "As many of you know, I am expecting our first child. My husband and I plan to focus on our family and the future of Beacon Heights. Thank you." With that, she moved to exit, Miles trailing behind. The cameras followed them, capturing the final image, the pregnant wife leading the once confident millionaire by the hand, while the would-be mistress was forcefully removed, screaming into the void. In the corridors behind the conference room, Linda Moore and Tony Delgado stood waiting. Linda nodded approvingly at Alexis. Tony offered a courteous tip of his cap, indicating that Maribel was already in hotel security's clutches. The next move would be up to Alexis: press charges for trespassing, intimidation, or let her go. Either way, Maribel's public meltdown had shattered her own credibility. Any story she tried to sell now would carry the stench of a desperate scene. Miles, shaken, turned to Alexis. "What happens now?" Alexis regarded him coolly. "Now, we go back out there, smile for the cameras, and pretend we're the perfect couple until I decide otherwise." He tried to catch her gaze, but she looked away. He felt a cold dread sink in. His empire was no longer truly his. He had become a figurehead. And as for Maribel, he doubted she would vanish quietly. But after that spectacle, her influence would be minimal. Alexis had won, there was no denying that. The only question left was how long she would let Miles linger at her side. The fallout from the Miami Expo played out in tabloids and online outlets. Headlines initially blared: "Woman crashes Beacon Heights, press conference, claims affair with CEO." But thanks to Alexis's carefully orchestrated remarks and Linda Moore's swift legal intimidation, the story quickly shifted. Mainstream business publications barely touched the scandal, focusing instead on Alexis's new role as interim CFO and portraying Maribel's outburst as the ramblings of a scorned woman seeking attention. Public sympathy rallied around Alexis, lauding her poise under pressure, especially given her pregnancy. Beacon Heights stock briefly rocked, stabilized when Henry Fitzgerald publicly reiterated his family's support for the firm. In a calculated move, Alexis and Miles gave a short interview to CNBC, dismissing Maribel as an opportunist whose claims are baseless and defamatory. They didn't mention any lawsuit, but hinted at the possibility. Maribel found herself cornered. No reputable media outlet wanted to buy her story after that conference debacle. Sarah Quintero from the New York Post ceased returning her calls, citing editorial reluctance to publish unverified allegations. Even the hush-hush online tabloids demanded clearer evidence Maribel had, but which no one believed belonged solely to her. She tried to sell a trove of text messages and photos to smaller gossip sites, but they offered paltry sums. The meltdown had stained her credibility beyond repair. To make matters worse, Beacon Heights suspended every last payment to Monsieur and Mastor Holdings, marking them for further legal review. Maribel's landlord, losing patience, started eviction proceedings. She spent her remaining savings on a sleazy attorney who filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming emotional distress and breach of contract against Miles, but Linda Moore swiftly countered with a brutal motion to dismiss. The judge, reading the initial briefs, commented in open court on the weakness of Maribel's case, signaling likely defeat. Alone in her cramped apartment, boxes half-packed, Maribel scrolled through social media. She saw pictures of Alexis, radiant at a fundraiser, Miles at her side. The caption read, "Power couple overcomes public smear, focuses on new baby and corporate growth." A wave of rage and despair washed over her. She had lost everything: her illusions of love, the promised wealth, her reputation. And the pregnant wife, once dismissed as docile, had executed a plan that left Maribel flailing like a fish on a hook. Meanwhile, at the Beaumont penthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Miles, resigned to his new role as Alexis's subordinate, tiptoed around her every mood. Their conversations were curt and functional. The only time genuine emotion flickered was when discussing preparations for the baby. A brand new nursery awaited with pastel walls, plush carpeting, and shelves lined with children's books. It was a reminder that no matter how fractured their relationship, they were bound by the child to come. One evening, as Alexis sipped a cup of herbal tea in the living room, Miles approached her with hesitant steps. "I want to apologize," he said quietly, "for everything." She looked up, her eyes distant. "Apology accepted, but it changes nothing. Our arrangement stands. You've forfeited the right to be a partner in this marriage. Now you're more of an accessory, a father to the baby, and a face to the company." He winced. "Is there any chance we can rebuild what we had?" She took a measured breath. "That depends on you, but don't think it'll happen overnight. You humiliated me. You risked our family's empire. As far as I'm concerned, this is about the baby. Whether or not you and I can ever be normal again is a question for another day." He nodded, understanding that this was as close to mercy as he might get. Deep down, he felt a flicker of gratitude. She could have destroyed him completely, yet had chosen not to. Even if her motives were more pragmatic than forgiving, he grasped onto that shred of hope. In the days and weeks that followed, Alexis solidified her position within Beacon Heights. Investors openly praised her leadership, and the real estate community watched in awe. Rumors swirled about her father's potential infusion of additional funds, ensuring that if Miles ever thought to challenge her again, he'd face near insurmountable odds. Maribel, on the other hand, faded into the shadows. Rumor had it that she relocated to a cheaper borough, though some claimed she left New York entirely. Her name became a footnote in a scandal that never fully blossomed, overshadowed by Alexis's carefully managed narrative. As Alexis entered her final trimester, she reflected on the path she'd taken. She had become something of a legend in social circles, praised for her composure, feared for her cunning. Though she had secured her empire, she recognized the emptiness that came with victory. She had saved her marriage in name only, forging an alliance rather than a loving bond. But for now, that was enough. She cradled her belly, feeling the baby's gentle kicks, and whispered, "It's you and me from now on. We'll be unstoppable." Several months later, Alexis gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Alexander Fitzgerald Beaumont. The media, still entranced by her story, documented every detail: the arrival at the hospital, the well wishes from dignitaries in real estate and shipping, even a short segment on Good Morning America. Miles stood by her side, a beaming father, though those closest to the couple sensed an unspoken tension. Back at home, the lavish nursery was finally in use, filled with cooing and the sweet scent of talcum powder. Late one night, as Alexis rocked Alexander in a soft armchair, Miles approached. He silently watched the tenderness in her eyes. "Thank you," he said eventually, voice trembling. "Thank you for giving me a chance to be a father." She smiled at the sleeping baby, not looking up. "I did it for him, not for you, but I'm glad you're here." In the months that followed, Miles worked tirelessly to mend what he had broken. He took on more parenting duties, joined Alexis in philanthropic ventures, and attended therapy, both individual and couples counseling, if only to prove he was serious about change. While Alexis remained cautious, she softened slightly, allowing moments of genuine closeness to blossom between them. Beacon Heights flourished under Alexis's guidance, expanding into new markets and rebranding itself as a socially conscious real estate firm. Shareholders lauded the power couple, attributing their success to a harmony of business acumen and unwavering unity. Few knew the real story behind that unity: a finely calibrated arrangement built on betrayal and a wife's ultimate revenge. As for Maribel, she vanished from Manhattan's social radar. Rumors circulated that she was working in a low-end real estate office in New Jersey, or that she'd left the country entirely. Every so often, a small-time blog would run a brief update or an exclusive interview about her side of the affair scandal, but without hard evidence, public interest fizzled. Eventually, her name faded into oblivion. In the quiet moments, Alexis sometimes reminisced about the day she'd stood before Miles with her ultimatum, the swirl of adrenaline and heartbreak. She didn't regret her choices. She had secured her child's future and preserved her family's empire. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the purity of her love had been tainted, replaced by a guarded, strategic form of devotion. Still, life moved on, and so did she. The child she adored grew each day, and Miles, for all his faults, turned into a doting father. On the surface, they were the perfect family photographed at charity galas, philanthropic missions, and tropical vacations. Behind that facade, Alexis remained ever vigilant, reminded of how fragile trust could be. But if life in the upper echelons had taught her anything, it was that power was the best shield against heartbreak. In the end, the mistress who thought she had won discovered too late that she was merely a pawn in a much larger game, and the pregnant wife, long underestimated, unleashed her ultimate revenge, not just to punish, but to claim her rightful throne. In a world where wealth, reputation, and ambition rule, victory belongs to those who play the game with unwavering resolve and a heart hardened by betrayal. A scandal that once threatened to tear everything apart instead reconfigured an empire, proving that even the deepest betrayals can become stepping stones for those shrewd enough to harness them. Alexis safeguarded her family's legacy, teaching both Miles and Maribel a lesson they would never forget. In the end, the mistress faded into obscurity, and the wife, who was once dismissed as weak, reigned triumphant. Yet the cost was profound. No victory in such high-stakes territory comes without scars, and every alliance born of revenge carries its own lingering shadows. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, share it with those who crave drama, intrigue, and the complexities of high society power struggles. Subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up so you won't miss the next gripping tale of love, betrayal, and redemption in a world where nothing is ever as it seems.